Good morning, everyone. This is Cameron Smith from TechLogix here today to go through another one of our webinars. This one's a little different. So a lot of folks who take classes with TechLogix, you know that we focus on fiber optic technology, different products, different applications. We really look at the technology side of the industry. Well, today we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be looking at lean and specifically how do we create efficiency in AV operations? This is a course. It's actually a workshop that we've taught for CEDIA for a couple of years. We've condensed the material down into webinar format, and we're going to be going through that today. Hopefully you're going to get some good tips, some good tricks that you can incorporate into your businesses, into your operations. And certainly what we're going to be looking at today is not necessarily focused on true operations, such as warehouse stocking and production and things like that. Lean really affects all levels of the enterprise. We'll talk about why. We'll talk about, some real world examples of where we've seen this in the past. And again, some things that you can implement in your own businesses around you and continue to move forward and really create that efficiency in your workplace and even your private life. Now, a couple of things before we get started. This is being recorded. You will get a link to the recording at the end of the session. That'll come via email. Feel free to share that with anybody else who you believe might get value out of what we're going to be looking at today. And then also, we encourage questions. You're muted, so you're going to have to type those questions into the GoToWebinar little software pop-up. We will get to those at the end of the session, or we'll reach out to you one-on-one as we conclude here. Let's make sure we start today by putting a little definition around this, though. What specifically is lean? And I know that there are a lot of folks on the webinar today who might have some ISO background. They may have heard of the terminology lean, and a lot of people tend to think of some of the big organizations, big manufacturers that have implemented this over the years. Toyota's, one of the best examples. They were one of the pioneers of this philosophy of improvement and process operational improvement. But really, if we take this whole concept, we take the core idea and put it into a nutshell, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about creating value. And we're talking about creating that value for our customers with fewer resources. So let's make sure we define what that customer or who that customer is. We'll do that because it might not be what you think of. But more specifically here, our goal, and really any time you look at a process, an operation, and again, this doesn't have to be manufacturing. This can be stocking something in the warehouse. This can be entering a sales order. This can be driving or engaging a customer for a sales proposal. All of these things can have process improvement. And ultimately, our goal here is to provide value to those customers with a defined process that has zero waste, no wasteful activities, no loss of time, no added expenses that we can get away from. So as we put all of this together, our goal is really to create value for our intended audience without a lot of added waste. Let's look at that customer because this is important. So often we tend to think of customers in their classical sense, right? Somebody I'm going to sell goods and services to. Yes, that is a consumer of our products and our services. But when we talk about lean, we talk about customers in terms of who are we engaging? Sometimes that person, that entity, that business may be something like a supplier, right? We want to bring suppliers into this conversation. It could be other colleagues. It can be other employees within our organization. We're trying to sell them on concepts. We're trying to sell them on process improvement. So as we think about who are we engaging, that's our customer. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's going to give you a check for something. It can be somebody who's looking at you and saying, provide me value. And provide me value as efficiently as possible because I know that if you're not efficient, my price is going to be higher. That's what we're trying to avoid. Ultimately, it's waste. We want to get waste out of our conversations. We want to get waste out of our processes. And we tend to, again, think of waste as, extra things that we throw away, packaging, products that are defective. And yeah, that is wasteful. But there's more to this conversation that tends to be a little bit behind the scenes. Defects, very evident. Overproduction, very evident. But there's other things like waiting. Okay, and we use this acronym downtime to try to quantify these other areas. Idle employees or equipment. How much money do we spend on our tools? How much money do we spend on the different resources within our operations to really create products, create services? What happens when those things are sitting stagnant? That's not very efficient. That's very wasteful. Resources, and sometimes these resources can be employees. Do we have people that are not efficiently doing their job? Are they engaging themselves in moving the business forward, or do they have downtime, right? Today's environment, that's incredibly evident. How do we engage employees and keep them moving forward in a productive way? Transportation, okay? Another area that, we don't tend to think of quantifying in terms of real cost. But when we start to move inventory, our employees, our staff, our tools, when we start to move these things around, that takes time, that takes wasted steps, wasted breath, wasted fuel. Can we decrease that to create more efficiencies and ultimately more profit? Inventory. Are we stocking the right amount of inventory? How are we managing that inventory? Do we have dead inventory? Most businesses that carry any goods, that carry inventory, right? One of our biggest plagues is, do we have too much? Is it sitting on the shelf? Is it stagnating? We want to make sure that our inventory is moving efficiently, creating revenue for us. So if we look at all of these things, we put it together, there's a lot of different places that we can target within the whole process of creating a service or creating a good, creating some sort of tangible benefit for our customers. We put all this together, we chart all this out, we want to target these different areas and create process improvement. So let's talk about a real world example. Let's try to quantify this, okay? What we have here is a small operation where we're going to build a rack, okay? And I've had the luxury over my career of not only spending a lot of time in operations, spending time, training on lean, working with some really smart people who've helped me grow as an operational leader and, as a functioning part of a team that really looks at process improvement. But I've also been in a lot of small operations, small integrators, small distributors, small places where we've got facilities very similar to what you see on the screen here. You've got a small front of office. You've got a little stock location with some shelves. You've got a workbench. And ultimately, we want to build a rack. So what does this look like? This process look like? This facility look like when that order comes in that says, hey, my customer needs an audiovisual rack built and shipped to the job site. Okay, well, let's walk through this. The order is going to come in the front of office. Sales did their job. They engaged the customer, got the order emailed in, pulled it off the computer. We're going to send that to the back operation, back to the bench. They're going to build this for us. Well, what do? They go to their bench. They look at that order. They walk over to the stock area. They grab the different things that are going to go into that rack, the electronics, the cables, the different mounting hardware. They're going to walk over to their tool bench. They're going to put all this together, going to assemble that rack, and then they're going to ship it off to that van to get delivered on site. Pretty straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward operation. Well, on the surface, we can look at this and say it's a small facility. I'm pretty efficient in my steps. This works fine. But when we actually watch our production team grab the things off the shelf, we watch our sales team walk that order to the back, We calculate how much time it takes to walk over to that workbench and grab tools and bring them back and wrap things up and get it onto the van. We find that there's a lot of motion here. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of time spent that really, frankly, isn't being invested in specifically creating that rack. You're spending time walking around, grabbing things off shelves versus actually doing an assembly process. So if we were to take the same operation and we were to optimize it, and certainly this comes from, some examples, some experiments, what we would call in the lean community a Kaizen, where we're actually doing some problem solving, creating some hypothetical steps to actually put a new operation in place and, move around, try it out, make sure we're more efficient, quantify our theories. What do we find? Well, we find that circular motion is far more efficient than dead end motion, meaning that if I was to have my tools right there at the workbench, if I was to have my stock location right there at the workbench, if I was to have my orders come in onto the PC right there on the workbench, and oh, by the way, there are no shelves that dead end against a wall. My people are never stopping. They are never turning around. They are moving in a circular motion. They're going to be able to shave 15 minutes, 30 minutes, one day, whatever it is, off of this actual process. And as we know, this is one rack example, but when you're building 100 racks a year, all of a sudden we start looking at our time cards and we realize, look, we just saved several $1,000s just by optimizing the flow of tools, flow of inventory, flow of one of our most important resources, which is headcount, time, employee time. This is the kind of thing we want to look at and we want to brainstorm because this helps us be more efficient in what we're doing. Ultimately, movement, and this is important, movement equals waste. How do we decrease the amount of movement? Waste translate into inefficiencies, which ultimately leads to higher prices. And if we're charging more than what we need to for goods and services, well, we have less profit and ultimately less customers. And when we look at some of the most profitable and the fastest growing companies out there in the United States and really worldwide, we find out that they're very good at this. They're very good at lean. They're very good at process improvement. They're very good at eliminating needless activities, needless inventory, and making sure that they're stocking down as much profit in the lowest prices for their customers as possible. One of the examples that I've always been blown away by is Toyota Motor Company. Obviously, this is one of the companies that is known for lean thinking. That's really helped pioneer this process. And one of the statistics that always jumped out at me is, big company, obviously, right? But every year they've got over 1 million suggestions from employees because they force their employees to really adopt this cultural thinking, this way of thinking. And they encourage employees to look at every level of the organization and suggest ways to be more efficient. And each year they have over 1 million suggestions coming from the employees. And they implement, this is what surprises me, not necessarily the million number, but they implement over 90% of those suggestions within a year time frame. So they take this very seriously. And they've also built an organization that has some of the lowest defect rates in their vehicles, very high sales numbers there, arguably a global leader when it comes to vehicle manufacturing. So this can be implemented. This can be implemented on a very large scale. It can also be implemented on a very small scale. So let's talk about some strategies. Okay, what can we do within our businesses, within our operations, within our, different levels of the organization to really create improvement and get you on the path to this way of thinking? Well, one of my favorite strategies is 5 whys. Okay, I like this one. This is very simple. Frankly, I do it with my kids all the time. I've got 3 little kids, and I find that this is very effective. Maybe not so effective with my wife. She's on to me now, so I can't really do this that much at home unless I'm engaging the kids. But what you do here is you look at a problem, whatever that problem may be, and you ask why at least 5 times. And the whole goal here is to get to the root cause. What's the root cause of the problem? Because so often we look at surface level, which doesn't really affect or fix the root issue. Okay, so let's talk about a real world example. We shipped a rack to a customer site, and that rack got scratched during transit. Okay, somebody's paying a lot of money. They're paying a lot of money for this equipment rack. We want it to look good. But unfortunately, during transit, it got scratched. And it's so easy to say, the guy handled it too roughly, okay? That's on them. Shame on them. That's the end of discussion. And so often in our organizations, we look at the most visible problem and we point our finger at that. But that doesn't always fix the problem. Firing those guys doesn't necessarily fix the root cause. And if we really want to have sustainable changes within our organizations, we got to get to that root cause. So let's think about this. Rack got scratched. Ask why. First question, why? Well, the guys didn't wrap it properly. They didn't wrap the rack properly. Well, why didn't they? Well, they ran out of material to do that. Okay? So we may be thinking they cut corners, but they didn't have any material to wrap that rack up. Why didn't they? Well, because they used it on the previous job and we didn't reorder any more yet. Why didn't we do that? Well, because we only reorder wrapping material once per month. Why do we do that? Because that's what we've always done. And what you'll find is so often in an organization, when you start to engage your colleagues, you'll find that it comes down to, well, that's the way we've always done it. This is the way we've always thought. This is written in stone, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. So what we find on the surface is, yeah, end result, we got a scratched rack, but it really has forced us to rethink, how do we handle inventory? How do we order? How are we deploying resources? Is this the most efficient way? And in some cases, yeah, it is the most efficient way. And we got to go up the food chain, up the process chart to try to figure out, are there other things that we can act? But in this example, the solution may be never run out of wrapping material. Yeah, you could argue that, we don't want to have too much stuff on the shelf, but if we Kanban, another term that we use in operations, where you always have a set amount of product on the shelf and then you have a trigger reorder point. So for example, I always have 2 spools on the shelf. When one spool is out, the second one slots in and it forces me to reorder. Automatically, I reorder a new spool rolling in. I never run out. Okay? There are different things we can do to really start to think about how do we solve these problems. Try it out. Next time you have a problem, ask why 5 times. Chart the issue out. Try to get to the root cause of what's really at the heart of the issue. Another tool that we really like is voice of the customer. We call this voice of the customer. Often we think we know what our colleagues, our suppliers, our true customers want, but it's a guess. It's a hypothetical. It's, again, going back to, I've always done it this way. I've always engaged my customers this way. So this is what I know they want. Is that true or not? Here's a great example. Most people on this webinar today, sure you can relate to this, and I'm sure we've all seen this if we've been around on this earth for more than 20 or 30 years. Let's talk about the monetary system. Okay, real example from our government. So our government was faced with the problem. Paper currency, paper bills, they don't last very long. It gets very expensive to produce more dollars, okay, more paper dollar bills. So what did our government do? They said, well, let's create coinage. Coins last longer. This is great. Instead of paper dollars, we'll get more people to have coins, and we won't have to produce as many, okay? They'll last longer. This is great. Great idea. Well, what'd they do? Produce these Susan B. Anthony dollars, had a big run on these things. Customers get these, consumers get these, Americans get these, and what do they find? We ain't going to walk around with a pocket full of coins. It's not going to work. Yeah, they last a long time, but in practice, nobody wants to walk around with a giant fanny pack or coin purse. Not sustainable. And what we found is after a couple of years of manufacturing these coins, based on zero interest from the public other than a little bit of collecting novelty, we ceased production. So this is one of those real world examples where we just didn't really understand the real consumer, the real world, and we invested a lot of time and resources into something that really didn't fit what our customers are asking for. And I'm sure in your business, same thing, right? Are you giving your customers a paper quote? Is that what they really want, or do they want it emailed? Are you engaging them face to face? A great example right now. So many people working remote, so many people at home, right? We're dealing with this COVID stuff right now. And do your customers want you to come to their homes and engage them face to face, engage the systems face to face? Or do we have to think about a different way to work with our customers? Yeah, most businesses are being forced to think through these issues right now. And this is a good exercise because this is not only sustainable, but it helps us grow as businesses and operational leaders, organizational leaders. So definitely make sure you understand and fully understand what the people around you are asking for, and certainly those customers. Understanding true costs and true value in each step of the process. Here's another thing, okay? So often we have processes within our organizations, very elaborate processes. And again, it goes back to, because this is the way we've always done it, but is that the right way? Is it wasteful, or is it as efficient as possible? So let's talk about this. Let's look at a real world example. I need to deposit money at the bank, okay? So what do? Well, a lot of us hop in the car, take those checks to the bank. Let's drive to the bank. We got to wait in line. We got to deposit those checks. And then we have to drive back to our office. And it always surprises me, the number of people who this is just the lunchtime activity, and whether it's drive and wait in line or go through the teller, go to the drive-up teller, whatever it may be, it always surprises me the amount of business leaders and small business owners that I know, that I work with, that this is a pretty standard activity, this face-to-face engagement with different people within our ecosystems. Well, we can look at this and we can chart out the true value of each step. And you may look at this simple example, what are we taking here? 26 minutes? And you may look at this and say, yeah, I have to do all four of those things. All four are bringing me value. All 26 minutes are spent in a high value manner. But we can really break this down, and I'll ask you what really matters here. The only thing that really matters is depositing those checks. The drive to the bank, that's not a value. Waiting in line, that's not a value-rich activity. Driving back to the office, not value-rich. All that matters is that check finds its way into the bank and you get money, okay? 1 minute of 26 minutes really resulted in value. And so often organizations, one of my old mentors, colleague of mine that I really grew up in the industry with, he always told me, you'll trip over dimes to pick up pennies. And this is one of those activities where that really holds true, because we look at this and we realize that every single day I'm spending 25 minutes of my life bringing no value to the organization. Only 1 minute's bringing true value. So how can I save 25 minutes per day? Well, can I automate this? Can I invest in a $300 reader that's going to read those checks automatically? Can I take pictures of them with my phone. There's different ways we can engage this solution, but it's very important to take a process, to chart out each step in that process and really hone in what is the true value of each one of those steps. Another tool, upside downside matrix. This is an easy one, okay? Make a quadrant, 4 boxes. We're going to chart out an idea. We're going to take a suggestion. Maybe this is from a team member. Maybe this is something you came up with. Maybe you looked at a process and you've got a potential solution to it, but that solution is going to cost some money or take some time, or maybe, you've got to invest in some training, whatever it may be. You can chart out the upsides and the downsides. And it's very important to look at these as short-term and long-term, okay? Because ultimately what we're looking for with any solution is long-term upsides that are going to be sustainable and rewarding, possibly in terms of profit improvement, possibly in terms of employee engagement, employee retention, whatever you're looking for. You want that solution to be checked in that box that is long-term upsides or long-term sustainable upside growth, okay? What we're okay investing in most of the time, short-term downsides. There's often pain to a solution. Change can be painful. We want to make that as short-term as possible, okay? Bite the bullet, get past it. Now we're starting to turn into efficiencies and revenue creation. All right, so once we enable some of this change, once we chart out our processes, we start to come up with some ideas. What do we do there? What do we do? Well, it's good practice to always have a leader. Get somebody who's engaged in this and who's going to walk the process through. But we want to try it out. We want to try the solution out. We want to chart it. We want to make sure that our ideas actually translates into efficiency, happier customers, process improvement. We plan the objectives and the processes necessary for results. We implement those, and then we verify those results. Very important. You don't just want to make a change for the sake of making a change. You want to make sure that change actually has those positive benefits, those long-term upsides. Check and verify the results. And then we want to act again. Okay? Maybe we're acting because the results didn't really, chart out as positive as we thought, or maybe we missed something and, something broke in the process chain, or, maybe we uncovered some other problems. But often we find out that, yeah, we did create efficiency. Yeah, we have a better organization. Yeah, we're moving forward in a very positive way. However, improvement never stops. Let's look at that new process. How can we create even more value? How can we make this even better? That's how a company as large as Toyota can implement 9 out of 10 suggestions, 900,000 suggestions on a yearly basis. They never stop improving. Okay? Very important for businesses of any size. You never stop improving. So 5 principles, right? Let's sum this up. We want to identify our customers and really understand what do they consider of value. We want to map this process and this value stream out. Okay? Make sure we understand that. Make sure we quantify that. And then we want to start to look at the process and identify where the waste is. Tackle how we eliminate that waste. And then ultimately, we want to make sure that that process improvement resonates with these customers that we have. It's creating value for them. And then ultimately, how do we continue to improve? How do we continue to make their experience better and better? How do we pursue perfection? All right, let's look at a real example here. Coming up on our time limit. Let's make sure we're all on the same page with this. Simple customer, we visited. They're asking us to give them a quote. Okay? They want a system. They want a new audiovisual system. They want that rack delivered, certainly without a scratch in it. But they want you to send them a quote so they can approve it. Now, there's a lot that goes into this. And a lot of people think that it's really simple to just snap something off via email. But in a lot of organizations, there's a lot of steps that go into it. We do a walkthrough. We take that information back to our organization's engineering, and we have them lay out a bill of materials. I'd say lay that bill of materials. They hand it back to you. Engineering hands it back to you. You're going to look at it. You're going to mark up those materials, those products, those services, and then you're going to hand it off to management to approve. Management's going to look at it, make sure the margins look good, nothing's forgotten, T's are crossed, I's are dotted. They're going to hand it back to sales, who's then going to turn it into a PDF and email it back to the customer. Okay? Pretty standard process in a lot of organizations. And we can chart this out. We can quantify how much time it takes to do each one of these things. You know, on the surface, we look at this and say, absolutely, I need to approve. You know, as a manager, I need to approve those numbers, those margins. As an engineer, I got to make sure my sales team is quoting the right materials and these products all work together. As a salesperson, I need to have ownership over this. And I'm not saying anything's right. I'm not saying anything's wrong, but all that really matters here is you understand what your customer wants and you put a quote in their hand. That's it. Everything else that happens in between, that's just fluff. There are different ways to get from point A to point B. You want to be as efficient as possible. Whatever process makes sense for your organization, you really want to focus on. Maybe today this is your process. Maybe you invest in engineering working more closely with sales, and we take that step out of the process. Maybe we invest in training our salespeople to have, margin understanding, where we don't need management to sign off on margin expectations. I'm not here to give you those answers. I'm here to say, look at your organization, look at the process, really understand each step in the process and how we can start to create efficiencies. And by doing that, you're going to save a lot of time. You're going to cut down on resources. You're going to increase your revenue. Your customers will be happier because of it. So a couple of strategies you can implement today. Pick a leader for your organization. Really important. And this does not have to be somebody who spends a lot of time, going to classes, getting certified, doing training. Lean is one of those things that this thinking has a lot of materials online. You can do a search. You can see a lot of institutes that are free, a lot of online classes that are free, materials that you can look at, you can read, you can really start to implement in your organization, but have a leader, have somebody who really champions this. We find that it was one of the most important things in just about every organization that I've ever been a part of. You definitely want to evangelize this to all levels of the organization. Empower them. Tell them to look for creative ways to cut down on waste. How do I create efficiency? The more you engage your team, the more ownership they will have, and the more they'll want to participate in making the organization better. And then ultimately, once you start to get these ideas, and maybe it's as simple as collecting the ideas in a box, right? Maybe it's as simple as emailing this to a central repository, and once a week, once a month, whatever the time period is, you go through those and you pick different ideas, but you want to work through them. You want to show to the organization that this is powerful, this has results. We are going to create a better organization by implementing this. And everybody is going to win through the process. Make it fun, make it rewarding. And if you do that, you will be surprised at how much money you can save overall, because small changes, especially in lean thinking, lead to big differences. Time is money. Money is time. Very important that you use that efficiently. I want to thank everybody for attending today. Hopefully you got a lot out of this session. We did have a question about teaching this workshop outside of CEDIA. This is something that historically we only do at trade events, but we're certainly happy to engage different organizations and provide some resources that we've used along the way. We are an AV manufacturer. We are running warehouses. We do have sales teams. This is stuff that we've worked with in big organizations over the years. I've been part of a Fortune 500, luckily fortunate enough to be part of a big organization where this is heavily invested in. But also small businesses. TechLogix is not a large business. We are a small manufacturer. We are a small organization. And this is something that we do on a day in, day out basis. If you do want to take any of our other training sessions, they're not all like this. A lot of product sessions, a lot of learning about technology. We do have those recorded online. We do have a lot of other materials out there that'll help you, move towards different technology directions. But certainly feel free to email me. Certainly feel free to give us a call at the office. We're happy to talk through any of this if you'd like. I want to thank you again for attending today. Hopefully you did get something out of it. You'll get an email from our team with links to this recording. You will also get some handouts that we've collected over the years. Thank you again. Take care. Stay safe out there.